My parents came to Jerusalem as a result of the genocide committed against the Armenians by the Ottoman Turks from 1915 to 1923. Both hailed from the Musadag area of Turkey. My father was transported via French warship to Port Said, Egypt, where refugee camps had been set up by the Allies. Mr. Reynolds, headmaster of St. George's, an Anglican mission school in Jerusalem, visited the Lazaret refugee camp to choose 5 boys for St. George's School. My father, Haruchun Boyajian, was one of them. Also chosen were Paul and Sarkis Karakashian, who became Haruchun's brothers-in-law. These young men were the refugees whose story of survival and endurance is told in Franz Werfel's story, The 40 Days of Musadag. My mother's journey was rather different. Her mother, Karun, had died shortly after childbirth. Her father, Hovannes, died of a heart attack during military maneuvers with the Armenian volunteer force in Cyprus. Her aunt, saddled with 3 children of her own, could not care for her, so she placed her with an Arab Muslim family in Urfa, Turkey. Her Armenian identity was concealed. After a few years, this aunt took my mother to be with her older sister Zaruhi. Somehow, my mother and her sister Zaruhi managed to join their brothers in Jerusalem. While my mother was training as a nurse, her brother's friend Haruchun volunteered to tutor her in English. They fell in love and were married September 27, 1930. I, Lucy Boyajian, was born in Jerusalem on December 14, 1932, at the government hospital. We are in the Armenian convent in the old city part of Jerusalem, and we are at the St. James Church. This is the church where I was baptized, and my brother Haig and Anahid were both baptized here, but my brother Peter was baptized in the Anglican St. George's Cathedral. Here they're singing. Come.
That's the part I like. Go ahead. Go inside.
We are here at the Gulbenkian Library to meet George Hintelian, who's going to give us the history of the Armenians and our heritage in Palestine. 32 years ago, I was here with my parents. He interviewed Daddy, and I promised to bring my father back the next year so he would continue interviewing. But my dad passed away within a week or two.
It was a shock. Yeah.
But it's a joy to come and see you 32 years later.
The successors are here.
Yes.
Now, another moving, touching thing would be, now here we have about 200 volumes. I mean, when Armenians came as survivors, they got together in every town, and each town created its own story. Armenians of Aintab or Kharpert. So each volume talks about the town and the village from where they survived. As you know, in the genocide, 70 towns were destroyed, and 3,500 villages. So we have here something like 200 volumes. But in the whole library, we have 28,000 memoirs about the genocide. So it's a huge collection, 28,000. And Turks are saying, how can we defeat 30,000 volumes?
Yeah, and they still deny. Oh, wow.
Well, that's what a liar does, deny, deny, deny.
History of the Armenians in the Holy Land is a solid 1,600 years. The reason is chronological, because Armenians accepted Christianity as a state religion in 301. One of their first thoughts was coming here. Since 19th century, we have been blessed by new finds, like mosaics on Mount of Olives, mosaics near Damascus Gate, etc. Of course, a mosaic means a very rich presence. Usually, an important church would have a mosaic floor. So Armenians had a very important and very stretched presence all over the city. Let's not forget that until the coming of the Turks, Jerusalem was part of Egypt. In Egypt, there is an important Armenian community, throughout the ages. So they used to come or trickle into the Holy Land. So this way, you have always the replenishment of the community.
Yeah. During the genocide, did the population spike substantially, or did it trickle in over a period of time?
Okay, I have studied this period. People erroneously say that thousands of Armenians came here. Looking at the records, we say like this: when Jamal Pasha was here, who was the High Commissioner or the High Commander, only 700 people came here, which is between 1914 and 1917.
From where?
These are dependents of soldiers. For example, if an Armenian soldier was a very important mechanic, or he had a profession, he was needed for the army, he could bring in his family or his mother or his sisters. The main Armenians came after 1920, not 1918. Between 1918 and 20, it was very poor, this area. But the big Armenian, bulk of Armenians came from Cilicia after the French gave it over to the Turks. Then we had like 7,000 Armenians. This is a generation which had no sense of deprivation, because everybody had lost everybody. Huh? You had, on the one hand, you had no psychological outlet. Nobody would hear you. Because if you say anything, you say, oh, my whole family is wiped out. So in a way, it's good, because you don't become naggy or you become tough. But at the same time, nobody is ready to hear you psychologically. Like my grandmother, who lost her husband in 1916. She was 21. There was a whole generation who always stayed in black and they never married. So this generation made big sacrifices, but they had the mission to rebuild the nation. Teachers, good mothers.
To rebuild the nation here?
Everywhere.
Everywhere.
Well, Jerusalem became an important center. For our numbers, think we had twice this problem. Once in 1917 to 1924, a huge wave of refugees. The next one is 1948.
Wow, this is so different. This is now the United Nations Office of Coordination of Human Affairs. Before, from 1938 till about 1942, this was our home. This used to be the dining room. My room was here. It was my bedroom. And there was a bed here, My brother and I were playing to see who could jump further, and he pushed me, and I landed on that windowsill with my forehead hitting that windowsill, and it bled profusely. When my brother saw the blood, he ran away. He went out, my parents came in, so they put me in the car and took me to the hospital where I had stitches on my head. I have no idea, honest, where it is, where it could have been. Nothing is the same. Could it be here? I have no idea. When I was 3 years old, 1936, my mother sent me to pre-kindergarten to the Swedish school. It was somewhere here. I have absolutely no idea. It was in the Musrara quarter, and our headmistress was Miss Eggplant. She was very big and Swedish looking. I went here till grade 4, which was 1941, and I went to the Jerusalem Girls College, an English Anglican mission school in Rahavia. I was there from 5th grade till secondary 2, which is equivalent to 10th grade. I'd like to go find my aunt's house now and the Mamilla Cemetery. That would be nice, and I think it's behind these buildings here. I'm not sure, it's either this or that. I have a feeling it's this one. And we used to walk to Cinema Rex, very close. And we used to go over the wall to the Muslim cemetery that now has the Wiesenthal Museum of Tolerance, which is doesn't go with the idea, because they dug up 7th century Muslim graves to build the Museum of Tolerance, and they built a parking lot, which really got the Muslims very, very aggravated and annoyed, and we had many people sign a petition that they should not do it, but of course nothing stops them, so they did build the museum. We used to collect butts of cigarettes, then we used to go to the cemetery and smoke it in secret. I have fond memories of the place, so I want to see it and see what it looks like now. We used to come to the YMCA on Saturdays, and I used to have swimming lessons and use their library, which was wonderful. And in the afternoons, we used to watch matches of cricket, tennis, and cross-country races. My father would be in the cricket matches. We used to come to the old city a lot, and we used to do our grocery shopping in our area where we lived from small groceries that were owned by Muslim families, Abu Hashim, Abu Ahid, Yassin, small groceries. We did not have a phone at home, so we got our phone calls, and we made our phone calls from these small grocery shops. We are in the courtyard of the Holy Sepulchre. This was one of the churches that Empress Helena discovered the crosses of Jesus. And during Easter Holy Week, which we are in right now for the Orthodox churches, we have so many tourists. As a young girl, when we lived here, we used to come and we would try to get in on Saturday before Easter. It's called Sept Noor, which is Saturday of Light. And I have never been able to stay in there because it would get so crowded. I had to get out. I used to like it when it was quiet, when you could come and see where Jesus was brought down from the cross, where people were just lying down and praying. When we had guests, we used to have a lot of guests from out of town. I used to take them to all these sites. It was just wonderful. I love taking tourists around and showing them my Jerusalem. At the Garden of Gethsemane, we would come on Maundy Thursdays with the Anglican Church, sit on a rock, have our service under one of the olive trees that probably Jesus sat under. Christmas Eve, we used to go to Beit Sahur, where it is shepherd's field. We would sing while shepherds watch their flocks by night. We would have lanterns. And from there, we would proceed to the Church of Nativity. In the courtyard, we would have our services and sing Christmas carols late at night before going back to Jerusalem. Pre-1948, we had 30% Christians in this country, and now we are less than 1%. And that is a very upsetting and worrying problem for Christians. Because people have fought over for these holy places, and now who will take care of them? The first 12, 13 years of my life, Jerusalem was quite peaceful, and it was a fun city to grow up in because it was international. But then the Jewish terrorists started becoming active, and in 1944-45 they started blowing up British police and soldiers. And on July 22nd, 1946, few Jewish terrorists, Irgun, blew up the King David Hotel. That building housed the government offices of the British colonial system that was governing Palestine then. Over 100 people were killed. My aunt's sister, Auntie Eugenie, was killed in that bombing. When Palestine was partitioned by the United Nations, many Arab families left their homes and went to a more Arab quarter. Jews went to a Jewish quarter. There was fighting going between East Jerusalem and West Jerusalem, which was one Jerusalem once upon a time. And we had bullets actually going through our house. It was getting dangerous to live there. And one night, while we were sleeping, one of these apartments, Mandelbaum apartment, was demolished by Zionists because the Haganah wanted to get a better view of the Arab forces on this side. It was a very traumatic night that we can't forget. We had to move from our house and to come to St. George's, which is right here. And there was a 3-hour ceasefire because my father had students that were both Jewish and Arab. So because of his being a teacher to these two fighting groups now, we were able to cross with a few suitcases. Careful. When we moved from our house, we came here. It was the junior part of the school, like from grade kindergarten till 5th grade. And we came with a few suitcases, and we lived upstairs there.
But there's someone living here now.
Yeah,
Right.
we can't go in, I don't think. And when there was heavy bombing or fighting, we went to the basement. That was down there. Did you see that? Can we open?
The main entrance.
Yes. Oh,
This was where the borders used to be.
that's right. Anahid and I slept here. Oh, my sister and I, we slept here. What is this? I don't know. Things have changed. It's such an old story, my story. Like our guide said, Lucy, you are history. You're telling me history. ايوه بحكي عربي. بحكي عربي، شو اسمك؟ أنا من أمريكا بس أنا كنت من هون. That's where we used to live. The first floor in that house, and across is Mandelbaum, and our other house was behind it. Abu Nicola's house. No man's land was beyond that. In this apartment, in our living room, where we were staying, the first truce in June 1948, I think it was the 8th of June, the first truce was signed, and it was headed by Count Bernadotte.
He was a Swedish count. Somehow or other, he fell afoul of the Zionist authorities, and they had him assassinated.
And this is where they signed the truce, because the line between Israel and Jordan was right that street behind us. The truce lasted a month, and it was no truce because both sides were arming, and that's when we went to Amman, because we knew there was going to be heavier fighting. And we stayed in the CMS, which is Christian Mission School, so they gave each refugee family one classroom to stay in. And there were 5 of us, and then Uncle Sarkis, Auntie Sophie, Johnny and Vicky, they had nowhere to go. So they came, and 9 of us stayed in the one room. When we came back from Amman, the fighting got worse, and all our friends had left the country. You just adapt.
The circumstances force you to adjust rapidly.
Exactly. It was either stay in war or escape being killed. We were fortunate we had a house. We were fortunate we had a room, because there were others in tents. Mahik? We're on our way to Ramallah. We used to come to Ramallah for recreation. We would take the bus. In 10 minutes, we would be in Ramallah. We'd have ice cream. We'd walk around the stores. I was so surprised. First of all, by the time it took to get to Ramallah, going through Kalandia, you have to go through checkpoint. It used to take 10 minutes. Now it takes 40 minutes. And then there is this terrible looking segregation wall, security wall, that the Israelis call it supposedly for their security, but in reality, it is for segregating the population. Behind the wall is the West Bank. That's where the Palestinian people live. All have to have permits to come and to move. So their movement is controlled and restricted. Supposedly they're free, but they're bound by walls, watchtowers, soldiers, checkpoints. It's scary. It's terrible. It's all about power and just breaking the morale of the people.
Who's there?
Hey, Annie.
Hi, Lucy. Hi. Welcome to Jerusalem. Welcome. Hello, Habib. How are you? How are you? Hi, Peter. What big surprise, Habibi. Wow.
Okay, the water boiled. Okay. I filled it. We love it.
It's kind of humid today, hot, bothersome.
Peter, it's hot but not humid.
We never agree on anything.
We
so-
do, we do.
Listen, never mind that. Just tell me, how did you meet Frank Stone and what happened?
Frank Stone, he's a wonderful man. Haig was walking in the streets of Jerusalem, right near St. George's, and he met this American guy who said, I want to go to Petra. How can I get there? Because this was 1951 summer, and Petra had been rediscovered in 1948. And Haig said, oh, why don't you come up to our apartment? My father took the school teachers to Petra during Easter holiday. You were with them, weren't you?
Yes, I was.
Tell me about it.
It was a long trip, I remember that, and we had to pack all our food. There were no hotel accommodations. Water was rationed, and when we arrived in Petra, which was, as I said, a long trip, we had to
sleep?
In the caves. Two caves, one for the ladies and one for the men.
Nice.
Because I was young, I was put with the ladies. So
You're always with the ladies. Nothing has changed.
That's right. That's right. All right, now let's go back to Frank.
Let's go back to Frank. So Frank came up to the apartment with Haig. I gave him coffee, Turkish Armenian coffee, and a few cookies. And he said, and young lady, what are your future plans? And I said, oh, I've applied to 2 universities in the United States. He said, why don't you wait? When I go back, I'll go to my alma mater. He had finished Heidelberg and was at Oberlin now. And I will see if I can get you a scholarship. And every day I was waiting for mail from Frank Stone to hear about my scholarship. And at the end of that summer, I did get my scholarship from Heidelberg for full academic scholarship. You all saw me off at Calandia.
Calandia Airport, I remember that.
All my friends came to see me off at Calandia Airport.
My sister,
Everybody came to wave goodbye. So that's what 1 cup of coffee did for me.
Maybe Annie can listen more intently.
Okay, I'm going to show you pictures of my babyhood. This was taken by Andy's father, Uncle Sepilian. That's me. My brother Haig, 2 years younger than me. Anahid, 3 years younger than Haig. And Peter, 7 years younger than Anahid, 12 years younger than me. This is my brother Peter. I'm 12 years older than you, kid. And that's me. I loved him. He was a cute baby.
He used to be very cute.
This is Susie, your older sister. And we used to smoke in the cemetery by secret.
My God.
Don't tell.
I'm going to tell everybody.
I left for the United States in September 1952, headed to Heidelberg College, where I was 3 years and got my BA in biology. And from there I went to Emory University and got my master's in plant ecology. I met Edward Janjigian in Atlanta. I fell in love. We got married in 8 weeks and came back to live in Lebanon. In '58, my husband wanted to come to the States on a business trip. I asked to come with him. The Marines landed in Lebanon, and his father advised us to try and stay in the US because he said this is no place to be and to raise a family. Our daughter Denise was born 1960. 2 years later, Mark was born. And in 1964, Charles. I have 10 grandchildren, and I have 1 great-grandson. That makes me a great-grandmother. I love Jerusalem. I love my roots in Jerusalem. I want to keep my roots in Jerusalem. And my childhood friendships I treasure. Like I have 2 friends right here, 3 friends actually.
Well, I think it has something to do with the fact that Israel is trying to monopolize Jerusalem and occupy it and make it a purely Jewish city. And I think that brings out the rebellion in most of those who lived and were reared in Jerusalem to lay a claim to it and to document it.
Yeah, and maybe I have a little rebel in me. You know, I'm Armenian. When we went on a trip to the States, we would never thought of staying there. And that was the 3rd time I had left my home and left everything. And you just start all over. But you know what? There is a power within, a joy and a will to live, and you keep going on, no matter what the circumstance.